Well, the CIA Triad is all about the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So let's start with the confidentiality first. Well, the confidentiality, it is all about the principle of keeping sensitive information private and ensuring that only authorized individuals have access to it, right? So as the definition is very simple, right? What it is trying to do basically, it is trying to keep the sensitive information private as much it can. So let's have a couple of examples in here. Let's say we have one of the user called maybe Sarah. Now Sarah would like to use the banking service, for example, right? So when she would like to use the banking service, what is going to happen? Bank is not going to utilize the service just like that, right? So it is trying to make sure when Sarah is going to make communication with the bank, it has to be secure connection. So what bank is going to do basically, they're going to provide their banking services over the HTTPS URL. So for example, HTTPS, so S is all about the secure, right? So as we can see here, it says like connection is secure. So when HTTPS has been used, it basically creates the tunnel between the user browser and the banking server. So that is the first step from the bank. It makes sure when the user is trying to use their services, the connection has to be secure. Now what happened basically, let's say this attacker is going to monitor this traffic. This attacker is not going to understand the traffic because the traffic is totally got encrypted with the help of this HTTPS protocol, right? So that is the one of the beauty of like using the secure tunnel, because if attacker even have the access to all this traffic or the packet capturing he might be doing, he will not be able to understand what is going on under this tunnel, right? So what is the next step bank is gonna do? The next step bank is gonna do, they're going to ask the username and password from the user side. So they would like to make sure whatever the user are coming or trying to use their services, they need to provide the credential. So in this case, the Sarah is going to provide the username and the password, right? So that is the credential thing what Sarah need to provide. But not only that, when Sarah is going to provide proper credential, bank is trying to make sure she also going to provide the multi-factor authentication. So what happened, like OTP is going to send to Sarah's device, maybe mobile or maybe on her email, and then she need to authenticate or she need to validate the OTP with the credential she provided, right? So this kind of like confidentiality step taken by the bank. And not only that, like in some cases what happened, let's say this user is like using the username and password, right? Sometimes the password they said which is maybe 15 to 18 characters, and in some cases user do forget the password, right? So they reach out to bank to sometime, you know, like how to unlock the user account, something like that. So few bank I think have the solution. What they do basically, they have enabled the QR based services. All you have to do is you have to just scan from your mobile app to the banking services, maybe on your laptop, and it will get like logged in with the help of this QR. So this is the good step from the bank to keep into confidentiality, like improve as well as making the simplicity for the users. Now let's try to understand the different example perspective. Let's say one of the patient has been admitted into the hospital, right? Let's say this hospital name is like ABC hospital, right? So when the patient is admitted, he's going to provide all his information related to his name, address, like social security number or maybe any government related ID, his phone number or email, those kind of thing. And based upon that, when the patient is getting like diagnosed into the hospital, maybe like whatever like day he might be admitted, right? The doctor are going to generate the report based upon his like health condition or maybe related to his payment information, the prescription he might be using, and all different kind of, you know, detail they're going to put into their medical record. But let's say this person is maybe one of the VIP person, right? So this kind of information become very sensitive. They don't want this information to be leaked into the public domain. So what happened basically in this hospital, this record basically only going to be accessed by the doctor or nurse who are basically, you know, diagnosing on that particular patient, right? So why this is important? When the other doctor is going to come from different hospital, let's say this doctor is coming from the hospital which is XYZ, they come for maybe doing some surgery or something like that. So they do have the access to the system, but they are not going to access each and everything in the hospital, right? Let's say this doctor understood about one of the VIP patient has been admitted in this hospital. So let's try to understand what kind of illness he may have. So this kind of information, when he is going to access, he is going to get denied, because as per the hospital policy, only the doctor has an access who are basically diagnosing, or maybe the doctor belong to the same hospital. So doctor coming from different hospital, they are not going to have the access on it, right? So the main motive of confidentiality is to keep the sensitive information private as much it can. So this is all about the confidentiality. Now let's move on to integrity. Well, the integrity is all about the principle of maintaining the accuracy, consistency, and the trustworthiness of data. So it basically ensures that the data or information is not altered, deleted, or tampered by any unauthorized individuals, right? So it is all about when the information into maybe in public domain or maybe private sector that not supposed to be altered, deleted, or tampered. So let's have example upon this as well. Now let's say in this example, Sarah would like to transfer some money to the ABC Corporation. Let's say she would like to transfer the money about 12,000 USD. All right. So what she's doing, basically she's putting all the information related to recipient and she's transferring the money. But the problem here happening while using the internet, let's say she was sitting into one of the cafe. All right. And in the cafe, she was using the public Wi-Fi. And this one of the attacker actually broadcasted his own Wi-Fi as a coffee shop, and Sarah was like connected to this one of the Wi-Fi, which is basically broadcasted by this attacker, right? So what happened, basically when the traffic was passing to the bank, it was passing through this attacker. Now here attacker was able to understand Sarah would like to transfer some money to one of the corporation. So what can be done? So here attacker might try to do, he tried to like put his own information into the recipient. So what he basically does, he changes the information from ABC Corporation to his own account, but when this information come to the bank directly rejects this transfer. So why is that? So what happened basically here, when Sarah was doing the transaction, it was created the tunnel between Sarah's browser and the bank, right? But when the traffic was passing through this attacker had decrypted this traffic, all right? So when the traffic was decrypted, bank was able to understand the communication was not secure anymore, because they run some hashing algorithm when the traffic is passing between user and the bank. So they were able to understand the connection was not private. That was one of the sign. Then after that, when the traffic was altered, it also runs the hashing algorithm that the traffic was altered somehow. For example, when Sarah put the information about ABC Bank, the hashing algorithm was ABC 123, for example. So after this attacker changed his own information, the hashing algorithm become like XYZ and 456. So this value was changed. So bank was able to understand when the value was changed from 123 to 456, that means the traffic is of course been altered, and that is the reason bank immediately declined the transaction. So this situation can also happen, for example, when you have firewall in your premises. So let's consider this is like traffic going between like corporate and the bank. So some of the next generation firewall, for example, this is next generation firewall, they do have some URL filtering and decryption capability, right? So when you are trying to use the banking services, sometimes you might like end up with one of the error that your connection is not secure, or your connection is maybe not private, something like that, right? So this happened basically, this one of the firewall decrypting the traffic, because firewall would like to understand if any malicious activity is going from you to the destination, right? And that is the reason firewall tried to understand just to stop the malicious activity. But the banking perspective, this is not good. So bank would like to make sure the connection has to be secure, it is not going to be decrypted or altered, right? And that is the reason that when you are using the firewall, sometimes you need to whitelist these decryption categories. For example, category related to banking services. My handwriting is very bad. So related to banking services, or related to social security number, or related to medical and health related categories, right? So these are the category basically we whitelist into the decryption policy, so that these are the traffic is not going to be decrypted and it should remain as secure as possible. So the main objective of the integrity, when the traffic is passing or the communication happening between two parties, it is not altered, deleted or tampered. Alright. Now let's move on to the next topic. The next one is availability. The principle of availability ensures that the systems, data and resources are basically accessible and available to the authorized users whenever they need it. Now let's have example upon the availability. Now let's say in this example, this is one of the company called ABC. We always have the ABC, like ABC Corp for example. So here maybe let's say 10,000 users are working, right? So maybe let's say one of the 100 users, they are basically from the sales department. They are working one of these sales into this big corporation, right? So they are basically accessing one of the sales data, and here maybe lots of data has like saved on the folder, right? And this data basically come from this one of the web server and one of the this SQL, something like that. Now let's say what happens, somehow this SQL servers goes down. So how are these users going to access this data? Because they are just coming to this application server, but they are not going beyond this data, because this data was actually hosted behind this SQL, right? So how are they going to access this data? That's not possible, right? So that is the reason the availability come into the picture. So the availability makes sure when you are having such scenario, you should be having at least like 2 server, or you should be having like another resources maybe in different location, so that if one server goes down, your user should be able to access the resources via the different server, right? Now the another scenario would be when this user basically accessing the data, the traffic basically goes from this switch and via this firewall. From this firewall it is going to the DMZ, right? Now let's say this particular organization did not have these 2 switches, they did have only one switch. What happens if that one switch goes down? It is completely like downtime for all the users, not only for the sales but like for the accounting, for marketing, IT, everybody, right? So what organization do, basically they put like 2 devices in HA, so that if one switch goes down, the other switch going to take over on the traffic. Same applies to this firewall. Let's say if this firewall goes down, the other firewall is going to take role, right? And let's say if this user trying to access the data, for example, they have the cloud services, this ABC cloud for example, they are hosted their all the services into the cloud, right? Now in this scenario, if this corporation had only one ISP, which is ISP1, and if this ISP goes down, they will lose the connectivity to this cloud, right? And that is the reason organization take like backup ISP as well, so that if this one ISP goes down, their communication is still going to work via the another ISP, which is ISP2. And nowadays we are moving most of the services into the cloud, and that is the reason the internet is now going to be the backbone of our services. So these are all examples belong to the office where all the services are located, right? Now let's say as per the design perspective, this ABC corporation basically located like more branches, for example like branch 1, okay, now also like connected to branch 2, and this all branches basically connecting to this like let's say headquarter, right? This is the headquarter, and like this specific data center is also located in headquarter. And let's have like example, this is one of the building where headquarter is located. What happens if the outages happen into specific building? So how this branch office is going to utilize the services basically located into data center? They won't, right? So that is the reason what this organization do, they relocate their data center not only one location but the multiple location. Let's say this data center is in US East, for example, okay. So if the data center goes down, they also host their services into like multiple location. So let's say they're going to host their data center into US West as well. So if this specific data center goes down, the all the branch offices is going to be like rerouted into US West. So that is the another scenario of the availability. So not only this, we can actually move our services globally. Now let's say in this example I have taken one of the screenshot from this Atomia, and it has basically mentioned very good scenario in a picture wise, like where Microsoft Azure is located, AWS and GCPs are located, right? This is like a current scenario, but it's going to be a more in future. So they have identified their location. So what happened, like if you have the server in US East, you can also move into US West. But let's say if there is an outage into US region, then they can also move their like data center into like some European location or maybe near to like Asia, right? This scenario can also going to be helped. Let's say one of the user basically he work in like US, right? But sometimes many users basically they travel from out of US region, they come to maybe like Europe, or they may work from the Asia. At this point, if they're trying to use their own services back into like in US, it is going to be like very high latency, right? And if there are any application which are sensitive to latency, then they are going to face slowness while accessing the application, right? Now let's say this user is using the Citrix application, which is basically hosted in US, and if he is going to access this application from Asia to US, it is going to be very slow for this specific user, right? Because all the profile is going to be loaded from US back to Asia, then only it's going to work, right? So the solution to this problem is cloud computing. So with the help of this cloud computing provided by these all vendors, the organization can host their like data center or their application at the nearest location where the users are traveling. So they can run their application in Asia, they can run application in Europe. So any user basically traveling nearest location, they can use this application with better performance now. So this is all about the availability. Now let's move on to another topic which is not belong to the CIA Triad, but that is also equally important, and that is something called the non-repudiation. So non-repudiation is all about any party in communication, they cannot deny the authenticity of their actions. So what does that mean? Let's have an example. Let's say in this example, Sarah transfers the money to this ABC corporation, and we had earlier example, she transfers the money which is 12,000 USD, right? So when this transaction has been successfully happened, it basically generates the receipt or the evidence at all the parties. So in this situation, let's say the recipient cannot deny. Let's say when Sarah transferred this money, 12,000 USD, the recipient cannot say that I haven't received the money, or he cannot say that I have not received 12,000 but I have received just 10,000, right? It's not possible because the evidence has been generated, and it has been generated both at sender side and the recipient side. All right. See, another example would be sender even cannot deny about something. Let's say Sarah says like I did provide you the 15,000 USD, it was not 12,000. So that is something not going to happen because the recipient going to provide his own receipt. He says like I received only 12,000 USD, so it's not possible that you transferred the 15,000 USD, right? So that is something is not going to be possible. The third scenario can come, even bank cannot deny. For example, when this 12,000 USD transaction was happen, both sender and recipient received the receipt, and at the same time the receipt was also generated at the bank side. That is something we call as a statement, right? So here like 99.9% bank is not going to say that the transaction was not happened, because they keep this record and they share this record with both sender and the recipient, right? But let's say sometime what happened, the transaction happened between the bank. For example, this bank belonged to Sarah and there is like another bank belong to recipient. If there is some communication like latency or the communication loss has been happened, the transaction get denied between the bank. At that point, what happened basically, the sender is going to get the reference ID that transaction was happened, the money was withdrawn from the account, but actually it was not delivered to the recipient. So at that point, what bank do basically, they provided the reference ID from their end to the another bank, and they basically track the transaction, why it got declined and what is the reason. And what happened basically, the money is going to be refunded to the Sarah bank because the transaction was basically not happened successful, right? So this is the great advantage of non-repudiation because it generates the evidence so that the party cannot deny about the evidence or transaction. So this not only apply about the banking services, they can also apply into like contractual. For example, if two parties are having some mutual understanding, they can also create a contract and they can write their signature. Maybe it's a manual or it may be like digital signature. If the signature is there, that means this party cannot deny about this contractual right. So there can be many scenario can happen where the evidence is really required in order one of the party denies about something, right? So that is all about the non-repudiation. So this was all about the CIA Triad, which is confidentiality, integrity, availability and non-repudiation. So this is for now and I will see you in the next one.